Hey, welcome back to MetFlex and Chill. This is your host, Rachel Gregory, and today is a solo episode where we are chatting about the best supplements for weight loss. So I got this question on Instagram. Specifically, the question was, what are the best supplements to help with weight loss? So I decided to turn this into its own episode because I wanted to chat about how supplements can either help or not help you with your body composition goals or weight loss in general. And then also just dive into some specifics within some supplements that may be beneficial and kind of break those down. So that's what this episode is all about. And before we dive in, a few quick announcements. I chat about this the last few weeks, but the Keto For Women Do-It-Yourself program is now open for enrollment. If you're interested in that, definitely check out the link in the show notes, or you can go to metflexlife.com. And you can check out the program tab at the top. Click that and it'll bring you to all of my programs, and you can just click on Keto for Women and learn all about it. You can see transformations from the last 2 years of women who have gone through the program, learn more about the course curriculum and all that jazz. So definitely check that out. Link is in the show notes. And also, I am coming out with a muscle building course for females specifically with my friend Ashleigh Vanhouten. Super excited about that. We have been working on it for the last few months, and we're excited to bring that to you. It's going to be a 3-month course where we dive into all things muscle building and really just break down the science and the practicality and give you a 3-month program to follow along with it. And again, this is going to be specific for females. So if you are female and you're interested in this course, definitely stay tuned. I'll be sharing more information, and the program will be going live at the beginning of April. Last announcement, shout out to our sponsor for the month of February, Ketobrick and Livesavage Apparel. Ketobrick is a ketogenic meal replacement performance bar that is shelf stable and comes in several different flavors. These companies are owned by my good friends Robert Sykes and Crystal Sykes. And this bar, usually, personally, I use the Keto Bricks. I melt them down into little bite-sized pieces, and they're a great treat throughout the day if you just have like a little sweet tooth or you want something chocolatey. So that's how I use it. I have a big sweet tooth, so just having a little kind of nibble of Keto Brick a few times a day tends to curb that craving. So that's how I use them. But if you want to learn more about Keto Brick, check them out. I will link their website in the show notes. And then they also have their Livesavage Apparel line, which is super high quality clothing, specifically leggings, sports bras. They have hats, t-shirts, all that jazz. So definitely check that out as well. I will link that in the show notes. And without further ado, let's get into the episode today, all about the best supplements for weight loss. Best supplements to help with weight loss. Okay, so there are no supplements at all that will directly cause weight loss or fat loss at all. It doesn't work like that. However, there are some supplements that can aid in making weight loss or fat loss a little bit easier or more efficient for some people, which is what I'm going to get into in a second. But when it comes to supplements in general, really the most important thing to realize is that 95% plus of your results are going to come from the following: calorie intake in alignment with your goals. So if you're looking to lose body fat, being in a deficit. If you're looking to gain muscle at the most optimal rate, probably being in a slight surplus. So calorie intake in alignment with your goals, adequate daily protein intake, training consistently, so lifting weights consistently, resistance training a few times a week, sleeping 7 to 9 hours per night, hitting your daily step goal, managing your stress, and optimizing nutrient timing to fit your specific training schedule if building muscle is your main goal or performance is your main goal. What are those? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those 7 things are where 95% of your results will come. Okay? like I said, there are some supplements that can potentially aid in helping you get to your results faster and can aid in overall health and performance, which could indirectly help with weight loss, but no supplement will directly cause fat loss or weight loss. So this is kind of the overarching thing that you need to understand. Supplements are just that, a supplement, and they could potentially help with like the last 5%, or if you're deficient in something, they could help to, create a more optimal environment to lose body fat, right? So if you're deficient in certain vitamins and minerals, that could play a potential role in your weight loss efforts for two specific reasons that I can think of, and that I've seen. So if you're deficient in something, a vitamin or mineral, which we're going to talk about in a second, it could potentially cause you to have less energy in general, right? If you're deficient in something, that could cause energy levels to plummet. So that in itself would cause you to have less energy throughout the day, obviously, which could lead to moving less throughout the day, right? You have less desire to move, to work out if you have less energy, obviously. So that could be something, right? Because if you have less energy throughout the day, you're not going to want to work out, you're not going to want to move. That could be hindering your weight loss or your fat loss efforts, right? Because we know that movement is important for that. Another one is stress. So if you have more stress going on, if you're not sleeping enough, that could be a result of some type of deficiency potentially, not always, and it really depends on the person, but that could be hindering your fat loss efforts, right? If you're having, a hard time sleeping at night, a hard time with your stress levels, if you're potentially deficient in something that's causing some of that, for example, this is just like right off the top of my head, magnesium deficiency, sometimes that can hinder sleep. So that would be something. If you're not sleeping, it's going to be it's going to make it harder for you to lose weight, lose body fat, build your best body composition. So those are some indirect ways. And I guess like if you have everything in check, like all of those 7 things I mentioned, if you have all of that in check, there are a few general supplements that could potentially benefit indirectly and help you with that last 5%, right? So I'm going to list out a few of the supplements that I personally take and recommend to my clients. But the biggest thing to realize here is that with most of these, you want to make sure that you check with your doctor first, right? Check your blood levels to see if you actually are deficient in these, because if you're not deficient, then it doesn't make sense to take these. If you are deficient, then it might make sense to take them, and it might help your efforts overall, right? For losing weight, if that's your goal, because like I said, energy levels, sleep, stress, things like that, those are indirectly related. So that's what I would say in terms of just the overall overarching kind of, thing that you need to think about, like when it comes to supplements, is that they don't directly cause fat loss or weight loss. They could potentially aid in pushing you forward if you have everything else in check that I mentioned. So a few of the supplements that I personally take and recommend, the first one is creatine monohydrate. So creatine monohydrate is one of the most researched and safe performance and cognition enhancing supplements out there. There's literally like 30 plus years of research on creatine monohydrate. And a lot of people don't understand how creatine monohydrate works. It's actually super, super simple. So I'm just going to explain it really quickly here, just to give you an idea of like what it does in your body, right? Because if you don't know what it does and you're just taking it, then you're going to get the benefit, but it makes sense to understand like why you're taking it, right? So how does creatine work? So basically, most of us know that your body uses ATP primarily for energy. ATP is just what we call the energy currency of our cells. It's what we get our energy from. It stands for adenosine triphosphate, right? So ATP, adenosine triphosphate, tri means 3, right? So you have 3 phosphates from ATP. When you use ATP for energy, you burn off one of those phosphates and it becomes what we call ADP. I promise this is a little sciencey, but I'm not gonna, it's gonna make sense, I promise. So when you use ATP for energy, you burn off one of those phosphates that has 3 phosphates, and then it becomes ADP, which is adenosine diphosphate. Di means 2. So now you only have 2 phosphates, right? So your body can't utilize ADP, adenosine diphosphate, for energy. It actually needs to have 3 phosphates to be able to utilize it for energy. So it needs to become ATP again, right? So this will happen naturally with energy turnover after a while. That's, how our bodies work. But this is where creatine comes into play, right? So we have another energy store called creatine phosphate. Creatine phosphate can actually lend its phosphate to that ADP. So it now has 3 phosphates and it's therefore ATP again, and your body can use it for energy, right? So you're basically thinking creatine phosphate lends its phosphate to ADP. ADP is that, that molecule that has 2, and now it's turned into 3 again, which makes it ATP. And now you can use that for energy again, right? So it's this cycle that goes on, constantly, right? So if your creatine stores, like if you have enough topped off creatine stores, or if you have like a topped off amount of creatine phosphate, if those stores are full, it's going to make this process a bit more efficient and effective, and can actually benefit your strength and power outputs, because you're able to go through that cycle of turning ADP back into ATP more efficiently. So that's really how it works, right? So you can think of supplementing with creatine as sort of quote unquote topping off the tank. That's what I always refer to it as. It allows you to maintain high intensity exercise for slightly longer, because again, it's making that cycle a little bit faster. So, maybe it allows you to push out 1 more rep, or go like even just like 1 to 2 seconds longer in a specific workout. That doesn't seem like much, on its own, but over time that can add up. Pushing out 1 more rep during your set, over time that will add up for sure. So that's where kind of creatine monohydrate comes into play, is it's basically topping off your creatine stores. And yes, we have, we can get creatine from our food. It's found naturally in animal foods like meat and fish and eggs and things like that. So if it's found naturally in your foods, like why would you supplement? Well, typically we can't really top off our creatine stores with just food. And especially if you don't eat like a ton of animal products, you definitely, won't have close to topped off stores. So that is kind of the main reason why supplementing with creatine is beneficial, because you're basically topping off your stores. Plus, creatine monohydrate is super, super cheap. So that is another thing. It just, there's like no reason not to take it. And beyond just sports performance, there are also benefits in terms of cognition. So other than, our skeletal muscles using ATP for energy, your brain actually uses it as well, right? So the same cycle that I mentioned that happens during exercise with that ATP to ADP turnover, that happens when you're thinking, when you're doing, work at your desk during the day, when you're using your brain. So supplementing with creatine actually has been shown in many, many studies to increase cognitive function as well. So that's another kind of reason. And because it's cheap. It's super cheap. The recommended dose for taking creatine is about 3 to 5 grams per day. You don't need to load creatine. Some people will say you have to take like a big dosage the first like week or 2 to load it. You don't need to do that. That potentially causes, or it could for sure cause a lot of digestive issues, which it's just not worth it. So just think about taking creatine as like a daily thing. So you just want to make sure you're taking it daily to ensure that you are topping off your tank, so to speak. I personally add about 4 to 5 grams of creatine monohydrate. I use the Now Foods creatine monohydrate. I'll link that in the show notes. I use the powder and I just add it to either my pre-workout drink or post-workout, or any other, drink I have throughout the day. Sometimes I'll add it to like, if I'm having like yogurt as a dessert, I'll add the creatine there. It's flavorless, you don't taste it. So it really doesn't matter when you take it, as long as you're just taking it consistently day to day. So again, creatine monohydrate is probably the most well-researched supplement out there. Personally, I think everyone should take creatine. There's really no downside. And when it comes to creatine monohydrate as a benefit for fat loss, again, it's not directly benefiting it, but if you have, if you're able to push a little bit harder in the gym, in your workouts, you're obviously over time going to hopefully build a little bit more muscle. We know that muscle is important for, looking lean. And when you do lose body fat, having more muscle will be more advantageous for you in the long run. So again, it doesn't directly cause fat loss or weight loss, but it can help you performance wise, which in itself can help you to get a little bit more out of your workouts potentially, which inadvertently could lead to better body composition outcomes, which is really what we want when we're talking about weight loss. Is we want to change our body composition, right? We want to build more muscle and lose body fat. So creatine monohydrate is super important. Well, it's not super important, I guess. It's just I don't know, basically how I just explained it. Hopefully it makes sense to you, why it could be beneficial for you and for most people. Again, it's not super important. You don't have to take it. You can definitely get a lot of creatine from your food, but if you want to top off those stores, and top off the tank, if you're someone who lifts regularly, if you're someone who wants to, benefit the most from cognitive, if you want to benefit the most from cognitive performance in terms of topping off that tank again, then it could be beneficial for that. So it's not necessary, but it's very cheap. It's one of the most well-researched supplements out there. To me, it just makes sense that, anybody should really be taking it. So I will link the one that I take in the show notes if you want to check it out. Super cheap. Again, like I mentioned, and it's just like a flavorless powder that you can add to anything really. So creatine monohydrate would be the first supplement that I recommend in general for most people. The second one would be vitamin D in combination with vitamin K. So the reason for this, and again, these next few supplements, you definitely want to check your blood levels first. Check with your doctor. Make sure that you are actually deficient in these before you start taking them. So with vitamin D, we know that vitamin D is one of the most common deficiencies. We can get vitamin D naturally from food and sunlight, but the issue is that most of us just don't really get enough time in the sun. Plus, a lot of us when we are in the sun, we're lathering on tons of sunscreen, which really doesn't help. And I could go off on a tangent about that, but I won't. Also the amount of vitamin D that we do get from our foods, right? We're not getting enough sunlight. That's where most of our vitamin D comes from. And then when we're talking about vitamin D in food, it's a negligible amount in most foods, outside of, I guess, fatty fish, you could say. And as a result, vitamin D deficiency is, like I said, extremely common and probably the most common deficiency we see, especially in the United States. So I do have a stat here. Currently, it's estimated that 70% of people in the United States have a vitamin D deficiency, while over 40% of the global population are deficient. So that is one of the reasons why vitamin D has been, touted as one of the most popular supplements these days. There's also a strong correlation with vitamin D levels and immune function. So it's not a coincidence that there's been a hype around vitamin D supplementation with the coronavirus happening. And then when I talk about vitamin K, so the reason I say vitamin D and vitamin K together, specifically vitamin D3 and vitamin K2, those are the most bioavailable and bioactive forms for our body to absorb, is the vitamin D3 form and the vitamin K2 form. And when you combine vitamin vitamin D3 with vitamin K2, it's important because of how they work together in your body. So vitamin D3 and K2 play an essential role in calcium uptake into your skeletal bone tissue. And there's been several studies that have shown that there's a synergistic effect when it comes to supplementing with both vitamin D3 and K2 together. And that's why you'll likely see them together in supplements. I personally take a vitamin D3 K2 supplement. I will link the two that I recommend in the show notes if you want to check those out. And if you're only taking vitamin D3 alone, then it probably makes sense to add a K2 supplement along with that, just to enhance that absorption of both of them. And they're also very cheap as well. So vitamin D3, K2 are very cheap supplements. So I would recommend a dose, just based off the research, is about 2,500 to 5,000 IU of D3. It's a large range. And again, you want to get tested to make sure that you are deficient and how much of a deficiency you have, so you can kind of know how much you should take. But generally 2,500 to 5,000 IU for D3, and then about 100 to 200 micrograms for K2 would be the general dosage. And I personally take the Now Foods brand or the Sports Research. Those are both good brands. And I recommend taking these in the morning or at lunchtime alongside a meal that contains some fat, because vitamin D and K are both fat soluble vitamins, which means that they are absorbed better when you consume them with fat. So the fat soluble items are vitamin A, D, E, and K. So if you don't consume those with some fat, they're not going to have as big of an absorption rate as they would if you had fat along with them. So sorry, apologize. That's why having them with a fatty meal, or not even a fatty meal, just with a meal that has some fat in it, is going to be advantageous. So that would be the next supplement. So we had creatine monohydrate, vitamin D3 combined with vitamin K2. The next one would be potentially fish oil. So it is important to balance out the ratio of omega-3 and omega-3 to omega-6s in your diet. Most of the population we know has a very high ratio of 6 to 3, which is just due to all the vegetable oils and processed crap that we consume. That is what we've seen in the population, especially in the United States. So when you are thinking about taking a fish oil supplement, especially if you don't eat any fatty fish, it might be a good idea to supplement a few days per week. You want to, when you're looking for a fish oil supplement, you want to look for a fish oil that has between 1.5 to 3 grams of combined EPA and DHA. That's where the power is in the fish oil, is that EPA and DHA. There's a lot of supplements out there that are just filled with crap, and if they don't have a significant amount of EPA and DHA, then you're just wasting your money. So between 1.5 to 3 grams of combined EPA, DHA, or you can think about looking at the supplement if it has 70% of that supplement is coming from EPA and DHA, then it should be a good quality fish oil supplement. So you want 70% plus of that fish oil to contain a combination of EPA and DHA. You should be good there. Personally, I take the Legion Athletics Triton fish oil. I will link that in the show notes. That's been my go-to recently. I actually keep it in the freezer. I don't take it every single day. I take it a few days a week. And if there are some weeks where I'm eating like fatty fish, then I probably won't take it, but it's kind of just an insurance policy for me. So that's another one. And then a few others. Zinc is another one that's a very common deficiency. Zinc is involved in so many different processes in our body. And if you are deficient in zinc, it can lead to a variety of different health issues. So most commonly, immune dysfunction, impaired growth, low testosterone levels, cognitive impairment. Those are some of the issues that come along with zinc deficiency. And one of the main reasons I think that we see zinc deficiency is that because zinc, a lot of people that are eating, like legumes and grains and things like that, those things have a lot of phytates in them. And the phytates can bind to zinc and actually inhibit its absorption. So if you're eating a lot of these foods, like plant-based foods, for example, and grains and stuff that might say they have, and even like cereals and things that are fortified with zinc, you actually are, when you're consuming them, yeah, they might have a lot of zinc in them, but they are not going to be absorbed well because the phytates in those foods actually hinder that absorption rate and inhibit it. So again, you want to check to make sure that you are actually deficient in zinc before taking it. That would be my recommendation. But if you do take zinc, it's probably best to take it on an empty stomach so that you increase that absorption rate and that you're not kind of compromising any other foods, kind of inhibiting any of that absorption. So personally, I got tested and I am a little bit deficient in zinc. So I take Now Foods brand zinc, or Thorne is another good brand. I will link those two in the show notes. What else do we have? Okay, so 2 more supplements that could potentially help with that last 5%, which is a very small amount, but it could add up over time. So protein powders are not essential at all, but they're more of like a nice to have. So if you struggle getting your protein in throughout the day, protein powders can be very beneficial, especially knowing that protein is one of the most important things when it comes to fat loss and weight loss. Like higher protein diets, time after time, study after study show that those are more beneficial to losing body fat and weight loss overall, and maintaining muscle mass, which is what we want if we are going on a diet, and even building muscle mass. And there's so many different reasons why this is the case. I have a whole blog post on protein and its importance. If you haven't checked that out yet, definitely check it out. So protein powders can be beneficial, especially, again, if you're someone who struggles with getting a good amount of protein in throughout your day. I like to think about protein powders as the, like in the 80-20 rule. So when we talk about the 80-20 rule, I always talk about, 80% of your diet throughout the day should be made up of food that is real food, whole food. So has it had a face at some point, or has it grown from the earth at some point, right? If it falls into one of those categories, then that is good. That should be about 80% of your diet. And then 20% can be other things like packaged foods, protein powders, things like that. That's where the 80-20 rule, that's how kind of I see it. But when we're talking about protein specifically, I also think about the 80-20 rule when it comes to protein. 80% of the protein you consume throughout the day should be from whole food sources of protein, right? So ideally animal-based sources, fish, eggs, meat, things like that. And then the other 20% could be from like protein powders and things like that, and protein bars potentially. Just because we want to make sure that we're getting, protein powder is a good source of protein, but it's processed, right? And it might not have all the other, it usually doesn't have all the other nutrients that we need to get from those other sources of protein, right? So that's just something to think about. Protein powders can be a great option. I use them to make protein ice cream. I use them to mix into like my Greek yogurt to give it some flavor. Some of the ones that I've been loving lately are the Active Stacks protein powder. Legion Health has a protein powder that I like. The peanut butter or chocolate peanut butter. I use some Now Foods protein powder. I use a bunch of different ones. You can find some of the ones that I use on my Amazon shop page, which I'll link in the show notes as well. And then lastly, wow, this episode's getting really long. Lastly, and the last supplement that I would say, and these aren't necessarily in any particular order either. I should have said that in the beginning. But a pre-workout supplement or just caffeine in general. Again, not necessary at all, not essential at all, but it could potentially benefit your workout, right? And give you a boost in performance. Specifically just with caffeine, right? Most pre-workouts, their benefits come from mostly caffeine. And you want to be careful when you do choose a pre-workout, just because a lot of them are just filled with crap. So make sure you get a high quality one if you are going to use it. I personally use the Equip the Equip pre-workout or the Legion pre-workout. Legion has a non-stim pre-workout, which actually doesn't contain caffeine, which is a good option if you already consume a lot of caffeine throughout the day, but it does have some other, what we call pump mechanisms or supplements that aid in that muscle pump and aid in, a little bit of energy turnover as well. So that could be a potential option. Again, this is the 5%. So don't worry about this if you don't have the other 95% in order, right? But it can potentially help you to have a little bit more energy during your workouts, right? If you take a pre-workout, or if you have some caffeine in your coffee before you work out, we know that caffeine is probably the best performance enhancer out there besides steroids, but not hopefully, but if you're listening to this, you're probably not taking steroids. But caffeine is probably the most, the highest potential for performance enhancement out there, just based off of all of the research we have. If it's not abused, of course, because your body can get used to caffeine if you're consuming it too much. Okay. Anyway, so I'm rambling on now, but caffeine could be a potential, or a pre-workout could be a potential supplement that aids in just your exercise performance, which could inherently cause you to work a little bit harder during your workouts, which inadvertently could cause you to build a little bit more muscle, burn a little bit more energy, if that is the goal, especially during a conditioning session or a cardio session, which can inadvertently, is that the right word? Indirectly, that's the right word, indirectly potentially lead to a little bit more fat loss or weight loss. So those would be the main supplements that I typically recommend, not just in the realm of fat loss, but in overall health, performance, muscle building, all of that stuff. I just figured that it would make sense to kind of go through all those, because like I said, if you are deficient in some specific things, it could make it a little bit harder to get to your goals. But again, it's really that 5%. So as long as if you don't have, I'm going to list these off again. If you don't have these things in check first, then adding in a supplement, unless you are severely deficient in it, is probably not going to do much in terms of fat loss. So make sure your calorie intake is in alignment with your goals. you have adequate daily protein intake throughout the day, you're training consistently, you're sleeping 7 to 9 hours per night, you're hitting your daily step goal, you're managing stress, and you're optimizing nutrient timing to fit your training schedule. That would be like the last thing. That is probably, again, I would say optimizing nutrient timing is probably the higher hanging fruit, right? So the low hanging fruit would be the first 6 things that I mentioned, and those things you need to have in check first. And if you're struggling with this, hire a coach. I always say this, have someone help you to dive into these different factors that you might not be optimizing. This is why I have my own coach, and this is why I love coaching my own clients, because I like to dig into the data, dig into everything that's going on with their lifestyle, not just like macros, not just training, but all the other factors that play into helping them to reach their goals. So if you're interested in one-on-one coaching, as always, make sure you check out my website. You can apply there. Thanks for listening to that episode. I hope you learned a lot. I hope you kind of took away from the breakdown of some of the supplements that I was chatting about. Hopefully I didn't get too scientific there, but hopefully that helped to kind of open your eyes a little bit more to how supplements could potentially help, but they're not by any means any type of magic weight loss anything. So hopefully that helped, and I was able to kind of open your eyes to that. And if you have any further questions, always feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to answer them. And another quick shout out to our sponsor for this month, Ketobrick and Livesavage Apparel. If you want to check out their products, definitely check out the link in the show notes. And that's all I got for you today. As always, if you're enjoying the show, please make sure to share it out to anybody that you think would be interested. If you post a screenshot and share it on Instagram, that'd be amazing. That helps to really spread the word about the show and get people interested. All right, I will chat with you next time.